Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. Calder Matthews stares at his plate. The salmon he had grilled earlier in the day was now cold and untouched. In the silence that enveloped the dining room, the kitchen clock ticked extra loud. He looks up at Mara, his wife of 17 years, who sits across from him, shaking her glass of red wine with a surprising calmness. "I've been sleeping with Jules for 6 months," she said, her voice flat and unapologetic. "I need a real man." Words hung between them. Calder's fork stops in midair, hanging over his mouth. He put down his fork silently. "A real man," he repeated, no storm brewing inside, his voice audible. Mara nodded, a smug look sweeping across her face. "You never can hear, Calder. Always working, always in your own world. I'm tired of waiting." Calder looked at her, really looked at her. This woman he had built a life with now looked like a stranger. Her blonde hair hung over her shoulders, styled recently at the expensive salon she frequented on his dime. The diamond necklace he gave her for her 15th anniversary sparkled around her neck. "Jules understands me," she continued, almost provoking him to respond. "He listens. He's passionate." "Dad, she's right." Brennan's voice broke the tension. Calder turns to his 19-year-old son, who has been silent until just now. "You're always locked in your office or at work. Mom's been lonely." The sharp edge of betrayal stabbed deeper. His own son, without hesitation, took her side. "How long has he known?" Calder asked, his eyes returning to Mara. "A month," she shrugged. "I don't think there's any point in keeping it from him. He's an adult." Calder nodded slowly, digesting the information. His fingers felt a numbing tingle as he pushed his chair away from the table, its legs scraping against the floor. "Dad, aren't you going to say anything?" Brennan questioned, her voice rising. "Mom is trying to be honest with you." Calder walked over to the key hook by the door, his movements calm and collected. He grabbed the car keys, and the cool touch of metal reached his palm. "Where are you going?" Mara cried out, her composure cracking for the first time. It wasn't the reaction she expected. "Calder, we need to talk about this." But Calder didn't turn around. He opened the front door and stepped into the cool evening air. Behind him, he heard Brennan's voice. "See, that's what I'm talking about." He just locks himself up. The door closed softly. In his car, Calder sat motionless, staring at the house he had worked so hard to try to provide. Through the dining room window, he could see Mara and Brennan, their mouths moving, talking animatedly, no doubt about him, plotting their next move. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb. He had no destination, but his hands seemed to know where to go, guiding him toward the highway that would take him away from Millbridge. As the distance between him and the broken family grows, Calder's thoughts become unusually clear. There was no anger, no desperate sadness, just a cold and growing determination. They made their choice. Now it was his turn to make his choice. Gravel crunched under his tires as Calder pulled up to the cabin. Pine Hollow is exactly as he remembers it. A small, weathered building nestled among towering trees, separated from its nearest neighbors by a quarter-mile of dense forest. His father built this place with his own hands, a sanctuary from the world. Now it will serve the same purpose for him. Calder stepped out of the car, stretching his stiff limbs after the 3-hour drive. The mountain air rushed into his lungs, fresh and clean. He hadn't been here in over 2 years. Mara always complained about the lack of amenities, and eventually he stopped proposing weekend vacations here. The key was stuck in the lock hole and rusted from not being used for a long time. With a firm twist, the door groaned open. Dust fluttered in the beam of his flashlight as he stepped inside. The power needed to be hooked up, but the moonlight spilling in through the windows was enough for him to see the path. He left his phone on the kitchen counter and watched as Mara's messages poured in 1 by 123 text messages and 7 missed calls, increasing in frequency as the night deepened. Deliberately remaining calm, he turned off his cell phone and slid it into a drawer. Wrapped in a musty-smelling blanket he found in the foyer, he slept surprisingly soundly on the old couch. As the morning light pours through the window, Calder awakens with a clear purpose. First, he called his assistant. "Ryan, I need 2 weeks off. Forward urgent matters to my email, but tell the others that I can't be reached at the moment." "Is everything all right, sir?" Ryan's concerns are clear. "Everything is fine. I just need some time for personal matters." Next, he called his attorney, Michael Donovan. "I need to meet with you as soon as possible." My wife is having an affair, and I expect she'll file for divorce. I'm sorry to hear that, Calder. How about tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I'll be there. The third call was to the janitor who looks after the lodge during the winter months. Jim, I need to hook up the power and send over some more supplies. I'll be staying here for a while. After arranging the basics, Calder spent the day clearing out cobwebs and dust and airing out the cabin that will be his home for the foreseeable future. There is something healing in the physical labor that brings order to chaos. He sat on the porch in the late afternoon, sipping a cup of black coffee and watching the shadows lengthen in the clearing. His cell phone was still off. Whatever's going on over at Millbridges is going to have to wait until he's ready to face it. The next morning, he drove to Pine Hollow proper, a small town with one main street and a few stores. At the hardware store, he purchased tools and materials to repair the cabin's sagging back door step and leaking roof. Haven't seen you around here in a while, Frank, the owner, said as he gave him the check. Been busy, Calder replied simply. Planning on staying long? Not sure yet. Frank nodded and didn't press the issue. That's the beauty of a town like Pine Hollow. People minding their own business. Over the next week, Calder settled into a routine. He rises at dawn, works in the shack until noon, then drives into town, eats lunch at the local diner, then returns to continue repairs until sundown. In the evenings, he sits by the fireplace and draws up plans not for the cabin, but for his life. On the seventh day, he finally turned his cell phone back on. A flood of notifications lit up the screen. More from Mara, now alternating between pleas and threats. A couple of them came from Brennan, asking him to come home. There were also a large number of concerned inquiries from friends and colleagues. One message stood out. Calder, it's Michael. I did some research. Call me back when it's convenient. Calder immediately returned the call, pacing the wooden porch while talking to his lawyer. I found some interesting financial anomalies, Michael said, opening the door. There have been large withdrawals from your joint account over the past 8 months. Does this time period mean anything to you? Calder's jaw tensed. According to her, that's about the time Mara started the affair. That's what I thought it was. We're talking about a sizable amount, Calder. Nearly $200,000. That number hangs in the air. Calder stares out into the forest, watching a deer feed in the understory, oblivious to his presence. What do you suggest, Michael? Record everything. I've already started building a case file. When you get back to town, we need to meet in person to discuss strategy. I'll be back in a couple days. After hanging up the phone, Calder remained standing on the porch thinking. The betrayal went much deeper than he had first thought. It's not just emotional infidelity. Mara has been systematically emptying their accounts, most likely in preparation for her life with Jules. That night, he made his decision. He doesn't rage, he doesn't plead. He will be cold, calculating, and patient. Mara chose her path, and now he's going to make sure she walks it alone, with all the consequences that come with it. 2 days later, Calder packed his few belongings, locked up his cabin, and returned to Millbridge. Not to reconcile, not to fight, but to win. Donovan and Associates occupies the top floor of one of Millbridge's few high-rise buildings. Calder sat across from Michael, reviewing the papers spread out between them. She's asking for half of everything, including your company, Michael said, tapping a pen against a legal document. There's also an alimony payment that's large enough to make most judges cringe. Calder nodded, not surprised. And Brennan? He's 19, so custody isn't an issue. But she wants you to continue to pay for his college expenses while she controls the trust fund you set up for him. Of course she thinks so. Calder leaned back in his chair, his expression inscrutable. What's our counter program? Michael pushes another file across the table. I'm ready for this. Considering the financial evidence we found and her admission of infidelity, we're in a very good position. Calder took a quick look at the document, noting the strong but fair terms. That's fine. What's next? We filed a response and waited for her attorney to contact us. In the meantime, you need to move back into that house. Calder's eyebrows raised. The house. Yes. This may be used against you if you have abandoned the marital home. I suggest you move into one of the guest rooms and maintain a civilized presence. The idea of sharing a room with Mara after her betrayal is repulsive, but Calder understands the strategy. Okay, I'm moving back tonight. As expected, Mara wasn't there when he arrived home. The house felt different, somehow colder, even though it was a warm spring afternoon outside. Calder took the suitcase upstairs to the guest room farthest from the master bedroom and methodically packed it up. He was in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner when he heard the sound of her key in the lock hole. Brennan's voice came from the foyer, followed by Mara's laughter, a voice that had once brought him joy, but was now hollow and harsh. Both froze when they saw him standing at the kitchen table, knife in hand, calmly slicing tomatoes. "What are you doing here?" Mara questioned the elaborate makeup that didn't quite hide the tension around her eyes. "I live here," Calder replied simply, not looking up from her tomato slicing. "You abandoned us," Brennan says, striking a confrontational pose. "You can't just come back as if nothing happened." Calder dropped his knife and turned fully to face them. "I haven't abandoned us, Brennan. There was no the moment your mother decided to sleep with another man and you chose to support her." Mara's face reddened with anger. "You have no right to talk to him like that." "I have every right. He's my son and he's old enough to understand the consequences of taking sides in adult matters." "I'm taking Mom's side because she's right about you," Brennan countered. "You're cold, always have been." Calder nodded as if pondering the comment. "Maybe, but I've never been dishonest, and I've never taken anything that didn't belong to me." He turned his attention to Mara. $200,000, to be exact. The blood fades from Mara's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "I think you know. My lawyer knows that too." Calder turned back to preparing his dinner. "I'll be staying in the East guest room until the divorce is finalized. I suggest we minimize our interactions." "You can't dictate to me in my own house," Mara stammered, her composure beginning to disintegrate. "Our house," Calder corrected. "It was bought with my income while you redecorated it every 2 years with the same money we apparently don't have a surplus of." "Mom, let's go," Brennan urged, tugging on her arm. "We don't need to hear this." Mara glares at Calder while he continues to prepare dinner as if they weren't there. "This isn't over," she hissed. "No," Calder agreed, finally giving her an icy look. "It's just getting started." The next week was spent in a cold standoff. Calder goes to work early in the morning and comes back late, avoiding Mara as much as possible. When they do meet, their exchanges are brief and full of tension. Brennan has returned to his dorm room at State College, but he has made his position clear by calling Mara every day but keeping quiet about his father. Calder was reviewing contracts in his home office Friday night when there was a knock at the door. Without waiting for a response, Mara walked in with a glass of red wine. "We need to talk," she said, trying to make the tone sound reasonable. Calder put down his pen. "I believe our lawyers are handling the communication." "Don't be silly, Calder. We've been married for 17 years. We can settle this privately without taking it to court. Like when you and Jules settled things privately without consulting me beforehand." Mara's expression stiffens. "That's not fair." "Fair." Calder leaned back in his chair. "You lied to me, stole money from our account, and turned our son against me. Which part of this seems fair?" "I made a mistake, okay? Is that what you want to hear?" She took a step closer, her voice softening. "But we can fix that. If for nothing else, for Brennan's sake." Calder studied her, seeing for the first time how good she was at manipulation. "It's not Brennan you're worried about. You're worried about losing your way of life." "Not really." "It's true. Your attorney's request makes that clear." Calder stands up and gathers his papers. "I'm not interested in solving anything, Mara. That time has passed. That's it. 17 years, and you just walk away." "I didn't walk away," Calder said calmly. "It's you. The moment you decide to share another man's bed." Mara's face is contorted with rage. "You're going to regret this, Calder. I'll take everything, your money, your company, your reputation. When I'm done, you'll wish you'd been more reasonable in the first place." An icy smile swept across Calder's lips. "You're welcome to try." 3 days later, Calder was once again sitting in Michael's office, reviewing Mara's latest legal maneuvers. She claims emotional abandonment. Michael explains. "It says that although you are present in person, you are emotionally absent." She uses it to justify affairs and financial withdrawals. Can she make this stand? Michael shook his head. "It's a flimsy argument, especially given the evidence we have." But she also tried to claim partial ownership of Matthews Construction on the grounds that she helped you expand your network and build client relationships. Calder's eyes narrowed. "She attends 3 company events a year and still complains every time." "I know, but she's got a great lawyer. Johnson specializes in high-conflict divorces, and is not above using underhanded tactics. Michael pushed a folder towards Calder. I prepared our response. We countered with evidence of her affair, financial misappropriation, and testimony from mutual friends who can attest to your commitment to the marriage. Calder nods in satisfaction as he flips through the file. This looks comprehensive. Yes, I have also attached a settlement offer that is fair but not overly generous. If she's smart, she'll take it. What if she's not smart? Michael's expression was grim. Then we'll move to the deposition phase and all of this will be made public. Calder considers this, weighing the potential impact on his business and reputation against the satisfaction of seeing Mara exposed for her behavior. Proceed as planned, he concluded. I will not be coerced into giving her more than she deserves. As he leaves the office building, Calder notices a familiar figure waiting by his car. Brennan stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression a mixture of anger and uncertainty. Dad, he said as Calder approached. What's wrong? Calder unlocked the car but didn't get in, giving his son his full attention. About the way you treat Mom. She's really upset that your lawyer is still making all these allegations. If they're true, they're not allegations, Brennan. But to take all this to court and make it public, do you know what that would do to her? Calder studied his son and saw signs of Mara's manipulation. Did she send you? Not. I came because I was worried about you too. That's not true, and we both know it. You're here because she asked you to intercede for her. Calder's voice was smooth and restrained. Tell me, did she tell you that she took $200,000 from our account to build a new life with Jules? Brennan's expression faltered. She said she needed security because you were planning to leave her. A bitter laugh escaped Calder's lips. I didn't have any plans to leave until I found out she'd been sleeping with another man for 6 months. She's lying to you, Brennan. And you let her lie because it was easier than facing the truth. The truth is you were never there for her. Or for me. Brennan's voice rose, drawing sideways glances from passers-by. You're always working, always at the office. I'm building a future for our family, Calder replies calmly. A future that your mother has now decided to realize. You don't even care, do you? Don't care about any of this. Calder's expression remained cold. I care very much. That's why I won't allow myself to be manipulated by your mother or by you. With that, he got into his car, leaving Brennan standing on the sidewalk. As he drove away, he caught a glimpse of his son in the rearview mirror, looking lost and angry. A part of him longed to go back, to try to explain, to try to salvage something between them. But Calder has made his decision. He won't give in, he won't break down. Mara made her choice, and Brennan made his. Now they all have to live with the consequences. The Millbridge Bulletin is not known for its subtlety, but the front page headline still took Calder by surprise. Local realtor involved in multiple affairs, prominent wives heartbroken. Below the headline is a sneak peek photo of Jules Harmon, showing him walking out of an upscale restaurant with his arm around a woman who is definitely not Mara. Calder sips his morning coffee as he schemes through the articles. Jules has reportedly been in an inappropriate relationship with at least 4 women in town at the same time, including Councilman Porter's wife. Anonymous sources say he specializes in targeting wealthy but unfulfilled married women, using his charisma to trick them into investing in fictitious real estate projects. The phone rang, interrupting his reading. It's Michael. See the paper? His lawyer opened the door to ask. Watching. The timing is really interesting. Indeed. The alderman's wife called the police, alleging fraud. Apparently, Harmon convinced her to invest $300,000 into a development program that didn't even exist. Calder put down his coffee. There are likely to be criminal charges? The district attorney is investigating. Sources say several other women have come forward as well. What about Mara? There was a hint of satisfaction in Michael's voice. There were no comments from her in the article, but my sources tell me she was completely blindsided. She had no idea he was still involved with other women, let alone scamming them out of their money. After hanging up the phone, Calder carefully folded the paper and placed it on the kitchen counter, making sure Mara could see it. Then he went to work, a cold, gotcha feeling gripping him. By noon, his cell phone was ringing nonstop, full of texts from friends and business associates expressing varying degrees of sympathy and curiosity. Calder ignored most of it, making short, non-committal replies to only a few close friends. Ryan knocked on his office door at noon. Sir, Mrs. Matthews is in the hall. She asked to see you. Calder looked at his watch. Let her up. When Mara stormed into his office a few minutes later, it was obvious she'd been crying. Carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the redness around her eyes and the blotchy redness on her cheeks. You know what? She split her sides and questioned, slamming the paper down on his desk. Do you know anyone else? Calder looked at her calmly. I don't know, but I'm not surprised. What does that mean? It means that men who have affairs with married women are not usually known for their moral fiber. Mara slumped into her chair, her anger dissipating into despair. He says I'm special. It's real between us. I guess he says that to all of them. There was no sympathy in Calder's voice, including Councilman Porter's wife, who is now suing him for fraud. Her head snapped up. What? Your boyfriend isn't just collecting fangirls, Mara. He's also collecting investment capital for non-existent development projects. Calder leaned forward, his eyes cold. Tell me, how much of our money did you give him? The blood faded from her face. I don't have. Was the $200,000 you took from our account invested in Jules' illusory real estate project? It's not like that, she whispered, but her eyes told a different story. Of course, you're just another target, Mara. Another rich, boring wife he can charm and exploit. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Her voice sharpened. See me humiliated? I'm not interested in your humiliation, Calder replied honestly. But I won't pretend to feel bad about the truth coming out. Everyone's talking about the way people looked at me in the grocery store this morning. She shook her head, fighting back tears. My friends aren't returning my calls. If they abandon you at the first sign of trouble, they're not really your friends. Just like you did to me, she retorted. Calder's expression stiffened. I haven't abandoned you, Mara. You betrayed me. There's a difference. I made a mistake, Calder. Her voice softened with a pleading tone. A terrible mistake. But we can get over this. We can go to counseling and start over. No. The word is final and unassailable. There's no starting over. Not after this. Because you're so perfect? Anger flared in her eyes again. Because you've never made a mistake? I'm far from perfect. But betrayal is not a mistake, Mara. It is a choice. A choice you make repeatedly for months on end. Calder stands up and signals the end of the conversation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to do. Calder, please, don't do this. Think, Brennan. Think of our home. You should have thought about Brennan and our home before you started sleeping with Jules. Calder's voice was flat and emotionless. Behavior has consequences, Mara. It's time you face them. She stared at him for a long moment, her expression shifting from pleading to icy recognition. You really don't care anymore, do you? I care about protecting what is mine. Other than that, he shrugged. I guess I don't care anymore. As the door closed behind her, Calder returned to his desk and forced himself to focus on the contract that awaited his review. He wouldn't let himself dwell on the broken look in Mara's eyes, or the twinge he'd felt when she'd left not regret, but perhaps the knowledge of what he'd once had. That night, when Calder walks into the house, he finds Mara on the phone in the kitchen, her voice low and urgent. Jules, please call me back. We need to talk about this. About us. Pause. There was a pause. I know what the papers say, but I'd like to hear your side of the story. Please. She stiffened at the sight of Calder and hung up quickly. They stared at each other in silence for a moment. He won't call back, Calder said finally, setting his briefcase on the counter. He's probably run off to another state by now. You don't know. I know his kind. Calder walks over to the refrigerator and pulls out the ingredients for a simple dinner. He's a liar, Mara. He gets what he wants and walks away. He loves me, she insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Does he love you? Or does he love what you can give him? She was speechless at this. The following week, the scandal intensified. More women came forward, and the total amount of missing investments climbed to nearly $1 million. Jules Harmon has indeed disappeared. His real estate office vacated overnight, and his cell phone is out of service. Mara became a virtual hermit, avoiding public places filled with whispers and ogling. The women's charity of which she was a director asked her to leave her post temporarily until the situation calmed down. The members of her weekly tennis group suddenly realized their schedules were too full to accommodate her any longer. Calder observed her isolation with a detached interest. He had expected satisfaction, even triumph, in her downfall. However, he felt nothing. There's only a numbness, and in a way, it's a relief. The woman who sat across the table, rattling her plate of food in silence, was already a stranger to him. One evening, while working in his home office, he heard the doorbell followed by the sound of whispered conversation. Out of curiosity, he walks down the hallway and sees Mara leading a teary-eyed brunette into the living room. "Diane Porter, the alderman's wife," Mara said stiffly when she noticed him. "Diane and I need to talk privately." He nodded and returned to his office, but left the door open. Their voices drifted out into the hallway, tentative at first, then becoming more and more agitated as they shared their experiences with Jules. "He said I was the only one," Diane sobbed. "We are special to each other." "He said the same thing to me," Mara replied, her voice hollow. Word for word. "Robert wants a divorce. Says he can't forgive the humiliation, let alone the money." Calder too. "Although I think the money bothers him more than the affair." There was a pause. Then Diane spoke again, her voice lower. "Is it true what they say about Jules taking money from all of us?" "Yes," Mara admitted. "I gave him $200,000 from our account for a development program at Pine Hollow. That program doesn't even exist." "Oh, Mara." There was another silence. Then Mara asked, "Have you heard from him since the story came out?" "No." "What about you?" "Nothing." Called and texted. He just disappeared. As the women continue their mutual solace, Calder returns to work, their voices fading into background noise. Their shared betrayal creates an unlikely bond, but it changes nothing for him. Mara made her choice, and now she will suffer the consequences, just as he is suffering his. The next morning, a new headline dominated the front page of the Gazette. "Harmon appears in Las Vegas as fraud investigation widens." The article details how Jules was seen showing up at a high-stakes poker table, apparently squandering his illegally obtained money. Calder left the paper on the kitchen table and went to work, wondering if this new development would deliver the final blow to any illusions Mara still held about her lover. When he came home that night, he found her sitting at the dining room table, papers scattered around her, her jaw taut with determination. "I've been talking to other women," she said without looking up as he entered. "We are prepared to jointly sue Jules. Criminal and civil." Calder raised his eyebrows. "Very good. I know it won't get our money back, but something has to be done." She finally raised her eyes to his. "I want to make this right, Calder. To the best of my ability." "It's too late for us, Mara." She nodded slowly. "I know, but I have to try. Anyway." For the first time since she'd confessed, Calder felt a twinge of respect for her. Not forgiveness. Never. But recognition of her attempt to take responsibility. It didn't change anything between them. The divorce proceedings continued, and their interactions remained cold and minimal. But in the days that followed, as Mara worked with other women to build cases against Jules, Calder observed a shift in her attitude. Determination replaced the desperate denial she had been clinging to. She's facing her consequences. That's exactly what he wanted from the beginning. The courtyard of the university campus was crowded with students enjoying a spring afternoon, but Calder hardly noticed as he headed toward the science building. After weeks of ignored phone calls and brief text messages, Brennan finally agreed to meet. He found his son sitting on a bench, his backpack at his feet, looking younger and more vulnerable than the last time Calder had seen him. "Thanks for wanting to see me," Calder said, taking a seat next to him. Brennan nodded stiffly. "Mom said I should hear what you have to say." The words poured down like a pot of cold water. "Your mother sent you to see me? She said you have the right to explain your position. Even if—" He paused, averting his gaze. "Even if she doesn't agree," Calder went on for him. "It's interesting timing considering all the blurbs about Jules." Brennan's shoulders tensed. "It has nothing to do with him." "Never mind." Calder leaned forward with your elbows on your knees. "Your mother's affair is an open secret now. The money she gave him is gone. And then all of a sudden, she encourages you to come talk to me? She's sorry for what happened, Dad. She made a mistake." "A mistake." Calder repeats the word, with bitterness on his tongue. 6 months of lying and cheating and stealing $200,000 from our account, and you call that a mistake? She's not happy. Brennan's voice rose, drawing sideways glances from passing students. "You were never there for her. Nor are they with us. Always working, always in the office." "I'm building a future for our family," Calder replies calmly. "Everything I do, every hour I work, is to provide security and opportunity for you both. We don't need more money or a bigger house, Dad. We need you in person. And that would justify what she's doing?" Brennan averted her gaze. "Not, but it can be explained." Calder studied his son and saw the struggle in his expression. You're still defending her. She's my mother, and I'm your father. But you didn't hesitate to take her side, did you? Blame me for her behavior. I don't have. You did it, Brennan. From the moment she confessed, you supported her claim that I was responsible for her affair. Brennan's face was red with anger. So what am I supposed to do? You went straight. You didn't even try to talk about it. You didn't try to solve the problem. There's nothing to fix. She betrayed our marriage and stole money from our family. She chose Jules over us. And now you're choosing revenge over saving what's left of our family. Brennan countered. Mom at least wants to try to make up for it. Calder gave a laugh, short and harsh. She told you that? That she wants to reconcile? Trying to make up for it? She's suing Jules, and she admits she was wrong. Because she had no choice, Calder corrected. Because her lover was exposed as a liar and used her like he used every other woman. Her reputation was in tatters. Her social circle had abandoned her. Now she's looking for a safety net. Brennan shook his head in disgust. You're so cold. What the hell do you care what this does to her, to me? I care very much what this does to you, Calder replied, his voice softening slightly. That's why I'm here, trying to make you understand things. What truth? Are you determined to ruin Mom? The truth is your mother used you, Calder says bluntly. She manipulated you to control me. She asked you to oppose me to strengthen her position. Not really. It's true, Brennan. Think about it. Why did she tell you about the affair before she confronted me? Why involve you in something that should be just between us? Brennan is silent, a confused look on his face. She needs an ally, Calder continued. A person who supports her claim proves that I am the villain and that her behavior is justified. And you're the perfect candidate. My son is against me. She wouldn't do that. Brennan protested, but his voice lacked substance. If you want to remain loyal to her, that's your choice, Calder said as he stood up. But understand that I will never forgive you both. No forgiveness for her betrayal or for allowing yourself to be used as a weapon against me. Brennan looked up at him, shock written all over her face. You can't be serious. I'm serious. Calder's voice was calm but firm. Behavior has consequences, Brennan. Your mother is learning her lesson. Maybe it's your turn now. He walked away without looking back, even though every step felt like lead. A part of him wanted to turn back, to moderate his words, to leave the door open for reconciliation. But that part is overwhelmed by a cold certainty that trust, once broken, can never be fully restored. Back in his car, Calder sits motionless, staring at the campus building where his son lives. He was telling the whole truth, as brutal as it was. Mara uses Brennan as a pawn in her game, and the boy allows it because he's too eager to believe the worst about his father. His cell phone buzzed with a text message from Michael. The judge denied Mara's motion for temporary spousal support. We are making progress. The news should have brought satisfaction, but Calder felt only a hollow emptiness. He started the engine and pulled away from the curb, leaving behind not only Brennan, but also the last few strands of the family connection they once had. That night, while Calder was working in his home office, he heard the front door slam shut. Heavy footsteps thumped up the stairs, followed by Brennan's voice raised with anger. How could you do that to me? To us. Mara's response was too soft to be heard, but her tone was defensive and pleading. Dad says you used me. Brennan continued, her voice choking. Say you told me about the affair to turn me against him. Is it true? Silence. Then came Mara's louder voice. Of course not. Your father is trying to manipulate you. Can't you see that? He's trying to drive a wedge between us because he knows we're stronger together. Then why did you tell me before he did? Why did you bring me into this? Silence again. Then a whisper, too low to hear. Calder returns to work, but his concentration is interrupted. The confrontation upstairs confirms what he already knows. Mara's carefully constructed narrative is starting to crack, and Brennan is finally starting to see the truth. It was nearly midnight when his office door slammed. Calder looked up to find Brennan standing in the doorway, red-eyed but determined. Can we talk? His son asked softly. Calder pointed to the chair across from him. Talk about what? Brennan sits down, his movements stiff with tension. I talked to Mom about why she told me about the affair before she confronted you. And then what? She said she needed moral support. Said she was afraid of how you would react. Calder nodded and waited for the rest. But it doesn't make sense, Brennan continued, his voice growing firmer. She wasn't afraid of you. She was so smug about it. It almost seemed like she wanted to hurt you. Yes, Calder agreed simply. And, looking back, she was the one who kept mentioning how distant you were, saying you were never around us. But you were there, weren't you? Maybe not always physically present, but you provide for us. You make sure we have everything we need. I tried, Calder says, careful to keep his tone neutral. I'm not saying I'm a perfect husband or father, Brennan. I work long hours. I missed out on things I should have been involved in. But I never betrayed your mother's trust. I've never stolen from our family. Brennan nods slowly, his expression confused. I don't think I'm being fair to you. I let Mom influence the way I look at things. I didn't stop to question why. A part of Calder wanted to embrace his son and tell him all was forgiven. But the larger part, the one hardened by weeks of betrayal and manipulation, remained vigilant. Why are you telling me this now? He asked. Because I don't want to be caught in the middle anymore, Brennan says honestly. I don't want to be used by either of you again. I never tried to use you, Brennan. No, but you've always been hard on me. Yes, Calder admits. Because I need you to see the truth, even if it hurts. Brennan is silent for a moment, thinking. So what do we do now? It's up to you, Calder replies. I can't pretend that the last few weeks haven't happened. You chose to believe the worst about me and didn't even give me a chance to defend myself. It's not something I can easily forget. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm really sorry. Calder studied his son and saw the genuine remorse in his expression. But it's not enough. It's not enough. I appreciate you saying that, Brennan. But trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. Brennan nodded, accepting the harsh truth. I know. I don't want to lose you, Dad. You haven't lost me, Calder said reassuringly, his voice softening slightly. But things can't go back to the way they were. We all have to live with the consequences of the choices we make. As Brennan left the office, Calder felt the first tiny cracks in the wall of ice he had built for himself. Not enough to forgive, not yet, maybe not ever, but enough to recognize that his son is taking the first steps to understand the full weight of what happened. It's a start, however small. There was a tense atmosphere in the courtroom as Calder sat down next to Michael at the plaintiff's table. Across the aisle, Mara sits with her attorney, Johnson, who is known for his aggressive tactics and dramatic courtroom presence. This hearing will determine property division and alimony, the end result of months of legal maneuvering and preparation. Mara looked subdued in a conservative navy blue suit with her hair simply pulled back into a bun. But Calder could see her nervousness in the tightly pursed corners of her mouth and the slight tremor in her hands as she organized the papers in front of her. Judge Eleanor Reeves walks in, her stern gaze sweeping across the courtroom before taking her seat. We are hearing Matthews versus Matthews today, she announced. I have reviewed the documents submitted by the parties. Mr. Johnson, you may begin by presenting your client's case. Johnson stood up and straightened his silk tie. Thank you, Your Honor. We seek an equitable distribution of the marital estate, including Mr. Matthews' firm, which Mrs. Matthews helped establish through her extensive contacts and client relationships. Further, the alimony we request should reflect the standard of living that Mrs. Matthews maintained throughout the marriage. Judge Reeves nodded. As for recent developments regarding Mrs. Matthews' alleged affair with Mr. Harmon, a regrettable personal matter, Your Honor, but it has nothing to do with the division of property. Mrs. Matthews' brief indiscretion does not negate 17 years of marriage or her contribution to Mr. Matthews' success. I understand. Mr. Donovan, your response. Michael stood up, his manner calm and focused. Your Honor, we oppose the request to sever Matthews' construction and the excessive alimony request. Mrs. Matthews' contribution to the company is minimal and inherently social rather than strategic or operational. He put a folder on the bench. More importantly, we have evidence that Mrs. Matthews systematically withdrew nearly $200,000 from the joint account during the 8-month period in which she and Mr. Harmon had their affair. This money was used in Mr. Harmon's fraudulent investment scheme, effectively stealing from the marital estate. Judge Reeves frowned as he reviewed the documents. These are serious charges, Mr. Donovan. Yes, Your Honor, and it's all well documented. We have bank records, witness statements, and statements made by Mrs. Matthews to the police in the fraud complaint filed against Mr. Harmon. Johnson jumped. Your Honor, my client was a victim of Mr. Harmon's scam. as were several other ladies in town. This is an obvious ploy to try to divert the real focus of the divorce case. The real problem, Michael countered, is that Mrs. Matthews has betrayed her husband both emotionally and financially. Having deliberately depleted the marital funds, she cannot now claim entitlement to additional assets. Judge Reeves raised his hand. I've heard enough opening statements. Let's proceed with the witness testimony session. Mr. Matthews, please take the witness stand. When Calder took the oath, he caught Mara's eye. Her expression was a mixture of provocation and apprehension. She knew what was coming next. Michael methodically led his testimony, identifying the timeline of their marriage, the process of building his construction company, and Mara's lifestyle. Mr. Matthews, when did you first become aware of your wife's affair? On March 15th of this year. She told me outright that she and Jules Harmon had been sleeping together for 6 months. What was your reaction at the time? I left the house and needed to digest this information. I didn't say much at the time. Did Mrs. Matthews ever express remorse for the affair? Not at first. She seemed proud of it, saying she needed a real man. It wasn't until Mr. Harmon was exposed as a fraud that she began to express regret. Johnson objected repeatedly, but Judge Reeves allowed most of the testimony. When Michael turned to the financial side, he produced bank records showing systematic withdrawals from their joint account. Mr. Matthews, did you authorize these withdrawals? No. I knew nothing about it until my attorney discovered this pattern after I filed for divorce. Do you know where these funds are going? According to my wife's statement to police, she gave money to Jules Harmon for what she believed to be an investment in a real estate development in Pine Hollow. A development that doesn't exist, Michael clarified. Yes. When Johnson began his cross-examination, his tone was aggressive and his questions were designed to irritate the other party. Is it true, Mr. Matthews, that during your marriage you often worked 60 to 70 hours a week? At some point, yes, in the startup phase. Is it also true that you miss many family events, birthdays, anniversaries, your son's school activities because of work? I miss some events, yes. Some. Johnson raised his eyebrows dramatically. Your son's high school graduation. Yes, I missed it because of an emergency at a major project site. Your 15th anniversary wedding anniversary. Yes, we've postponed the celebration until next weekend. Your father-in-law's funeral. Calder's jaw tensed slightly. Yes, I was out of the country on business and didn't make it back in time. Johnson nodded in satisfaction. So, in fact, you were emotionally absent from the marriage long before Mrs. Matthews sought other solace. Objection. Michael interjected. Leading questions. Sustained, agreed Judge Reeves. Mr. Johnson, questions only, please. Johnson has changed tactics. Mr. Matthews, is it true that your wife played a key role in helping you land clients through her social connections? She introduced me to some potential clients at a social event, yes. Including the Westridge development contract? Your company's biggest project to date. The introduction was through her, yes. But the contract was awarded based on my company's reputation and bid. However, without that introduction, you would not have been invited to bid, would you? Probably not at the time, but we'll likely get a chance later as well. The questioning lasted nearly 2 hours, with Johnson attempting to justify Mara's contributions to the company and Calder's emotional detachment from her behavior. Calder, however, kept his composure and answered honestly, but did not give Johnson the emotional reaction he clearly hoped to see. The contrast was stark when it was Mara's turn to take the witness stand. Under Johnson's careful guidance, she portrays herself as a devoted wife who supports Calder's ambitions while raising their son almost alone. She admitted to the affair, but characterized it as a desperate search for emotional connection after years of neglect. I was wrong, she said, her voice choked with what looked like genuine remorse. Jules and I made a terrible mistake, I know. But that doesn't erase 17 years of marriage or my dedication to our family and the Calder business. When Michael began to cross-examine, his approach methodical and precise. Mrs. Matthews, you said that you felt emotionally neglected in your marriage. Did you seek marriage counseling before you began your affair with Mr. Harmon? No, but a yes or no answer will suffice, Mrs. Matthews. Have you ever clearly communicated to your husband that you are unhappy enough to consider ending your marriage? Without using those exact words. In fact, according to your credit card statements, during your affair, You spent more than $30,000 on personal items, designer clothes, spa treatments, weekend trips, all of which your husband's company's income to pay for it. Is that right? I do. Michael then turned to the financial withdrawal and had Mara confirm the amount and date. What specifically did Mr. Harmon tell you this money was for? A condominium development in Pine Hollow. He says it's a guaranteed 20% return in 6 months. Did you consult your husband or financial advisor before making this investment? No. Why not? Mara hesitated. No, Calder wouldn't approve. Is it because it was a bad investment, or because it went to your lover? Objection, Johnson shouted. Withdrawn, Michael said calmly. Mrs. Matthews, when did you first suspect that Mr. Harmon might be deceiving you? When the newspapers break stories about other women. Not before that. Even though he never provided investment documents or updates on the supposed development. I trust him, she whispered. You entrusted him with $200,000 of marital assets without any verification or due diligence. Is that your testimony? By the time Michael finished his cross-examination, Mara's carefully constructed narrative had collapsed. Her teary-eyed remorse appeared contrived, and her claimed contribution to the success of Calder's career was exaggerated. After the parties made their closing arguments, Judge Reeves announced that she would issue a ruling next week. As the courtroom broke up, Calder felt a strange sense of detachment. The details of his private life were laid bare in this public forum, but he felt nothing except a calm determination to see the proceedings through to the end. Outside the courthouse steps, reporters gathered around. Calder declined to comment and walked briskly alongside Michael to his car. We presented a strong case, his attorney assured him. Reeves is fair, but not emotional. I think she saw through Johnson's trick. What are our chances of winning? Calder asked as they reached his car. Very good, very good. Michael smiled a little. Johnson pushed too hard on the emotional neglect point. There is no evidence of actual abuse or abandonment, which is simply not enough to justify Mara's behavior. Calder nodded, feeling the first hint of relief since the process began. What about the company? Security. Her contribution was minimal and indirect. Reeves will not award her any ownership shares. A week later, Calder sat in the same courtroom and heard Judge Reeves read her decision. Her voice was clear and firm as she outlined her decision on the alimony application. I am approving the granting of temporary alimony to Mrs. Matthews for a period of 2 years to enable her to re-establish her career. The amount was set at $3,000 per month, well below the amount requested, taking into account unauthorized withdrawals from the joint account. Mara's face crumpled and her knuckles whitened as she gripped the table. As to the division of the property, Judge Reeves continued. The family home will be sold and the proceeds, after deducting the $200,000 taken by Mrs. Matthews, divided equally. Then she talked directly about the company. Matthews Construction remains the sole property of Mr. Matthews. Mrs. Matthews' contribution, while noted, was not sufficient to warrant partial ownership. Johnson leans in and whispers urgently to Mara, but she shakes her head firmly. When the judge finished outlining the division of remaining assets and retirement accounts, she told them, "This divorce, like many divorces, has been contentious and painful for all involved. But it's over now. I hope both parties abide by the terms set forth today and move on with their respective lives." As the court adjourned, Calder felt no sense of victory, no sense of vindication, only a silent sense of finality. He protected what was his and refused to be manipulated or coerced into giving Mara more than she deserved. His life will go on, changed but intact. Mara caught his gaze as they walked out of the courtroom, her expression inscrutable. For a moment, it seemed as if she wanted to approach him, but Johnson steered her toward a side corridor, already discussing the possibility of an appeal. Calder watched them leave and felt the last thread connecting him to his past life finally snap. There will be practical issues to deal with, selling the house, dividing up personal belongings, but the hardest part is over. He won, not because he's better than Mara, but because he refuses to let her break him. In that rejection, he found his strength. Summer heat shimmers above the asphalt as Calder pulls into the driveway of his new home, a modern 2-bedroom apartment overlooking the river. After weeks of house hunting, that family home finally sold, bringing that chapter to a definitive close. He was unloading groceries from the car when his cell phone buzzed with a text from Brennan. "Dad, Can we talk? I'm back in town for a couple days. Something important. Calder stared at the message, his thumb hovering over the top of the screen. It had been a few weeks since that confrontation they'd had at the university, weeks in which communication had been minimal, mostly brief text messages about practical matters. After a moment's hesitation, he typed a reply. I'm at the new place. You can come over at 6. The reply came immediately. Thanks. See you there. The hours passed slowly before Brennan arrived. Calder was busy unpacking the last few boxes in his home office, methodically organizing books and papers. The apartment is smaller than the house, but it suits him perfectly. Clean lines, minimalist furnishings, no trace of Mara's flamboyant taste. At exactly 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. Calder opens the door to see his son standing uncertainly in the doorway, thinner than the last time he saw him. Come in, Calder said, stepping aside. Brennan walks in, his eyes scanning the space. Nice place. It's enough for me. Calder led him to the living room. Would you like a drink? Water's fine, thanks. When Calder returns with 2 glasses of water, he finds Brennan standing by the window, looking out over the river below. Awesome view, his son commented, taking the water. That's why I picked it. Calder sits down in one of the armchairs and motions for Brennan to sit in the other. You said you wanted to talk. Brennan nodded and set the cup on the side table. I've been thinking a lot over the past few weeks. About everything that happened with you and Mom. And my role in it. Calder stayed silent and waited. I realize I've been unfair to you. Brennan continued, his voice growing steadier. I took Mom's side without thinking, because it was easier than facing the truth. I let her use me against you, just like you said. What changed your mind? Calder asked, his tone neutral. A lot of things. Brennan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that, like Calder's, caused a momentary tingle. The first is the evidence of the court case. I read the trial transcript, the whole thing. The financial records are very clear. Yes. And Brennan hesitated. I've been talking to Mom more. It was real conversation, not just listening to her tell me her version. The more we talked, the more inconsistencies I noticed. At first it was something small, then something bigger. He leaned forward, his eyes looking straight at Calder. Last week, she admitted that she told me about the affair just to get me on her side. She thinks you're more likely to give in to her demands in the divorce if I blame you too. Calder digested the information with an expressionless face, despite the cold chill he felt in his stomach. I see. I'm sorry, Dad, Brennan said, his voice slightly choked. I'm sorry I didn't trust you. I'm sorry I let myself be manipulated. I'm sorry I betrayed you when you needed support. Apologies hung between them, sincere and raw. A part of Calder wanted to accept it right away, to bridge the widening gap between them. But the larger part, that part hardened by betrayal, remained vigilant. I appreciate you saying that, Brennan. I really. But it is not enough, his son went on for him, with sad understanding in his eyes. It's not that simple, Calder clarifies. Trust can't be rebuilt with one conversation. I know. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. Brennan swallowed hard. I don't want to lose you, Dad. I don't want what Mom did to ruin our relationship too. Calder studied his son and saw the genuine remorse in his expression. But it's not enough. It's not enough. You made your choice, Brennan. I can't forgive you for what you've done. And I'm not going to let you back into my life like nothing happened. You have to learn from this, even if it's too late for us. The words were harsh, but Calder said them without anger, just stating what he believed to be true. Brennan cringed, but nodded slowly. I understand, but I'm not giving up. I will prove that I have changed and that I can be trusted again. That's your choice. They sat in silence for a moment, then Brennan spoke again. How have you been? New place? Business? Pretty good, Calder replied, letting the conversation turn to safer topics. The Westridge project is ahead of schedule. We start the Jensen development program next month. That's great. What about you personally? Calder raised his eyebrows. What do you mean? You? Brennan hesitated. Are you seeing someone else? The question was unexpected. No, I'm not interested in that right now. Mom thinks you're with your friend Annalise. She's convinced you were having an affair with her before the divorce. A short, humorless laugh escaped Calder's lips. Of course she thinks that. It's easier for her to believe I cheated on her too than to take full responsibility for her behavior. You and Annalise? I mean, no, Calder said firmly. Annalise is a friend and business partner. That's all. Brennan nodded, accepting that. I guess so. But Mom, he shrugged. She only sees what she wants to see. How is she? Calder asked, surprised by the question himself. It's a struggle, Brennan admits. Alimony helps, but it's hard for her to get a job. Her reputation in town is almost completely ruined. Unfortunately, but it's a consequence of her choices. I know. Brennan picks up the glass of water and twirls it in his hand. She's thinking about moving to Portland. Start over. Go somewhere where no one knows her. Calder nodded, but didn't comment. Mara's future plans were no longer his concern. They talked for another hour, carefully avoiding the most painful topics. The atmosphere wasn't relaxed, but it wasn't hostile either. It's a tentative first step towards some kind of new relationship. When Brennan was ready to leave, he stopped at the door. Can I call you later? Maybe we could have lunch together? Calder considers, weighing his lingering hurt against the possibility of re-establishing some form of relationship with his son. You can call, he concluded. I can't promise more than that right now. I understand. Thanks, Dad. Brennan hesitated, then added, I won't let you down again. I promise. After his son left, Calder stood by the window and watched Brennan's car pull away from the curb. The evening light cast long shadows on the river below, the water swirling with golden reflections. He didn't feel a pang of forgiveness or a sudden healing of the rift between them. But something did, a tiny crack in the wall of ice he had built for himself. Not enough to forgive, not yet, maybe not ever, but enough to recognize that his son is taking steps to understand the full weight of what happened. It's a start, however small. The for sale sign on Mara's rental apartment has been up for 3 weeks, a visual reminder of her impending departure from Millbridge. Calder noticed it as he drove by to meet a potential client. They haven't spoken directly to Mara since the final divorce hearing 4 months ago. All of their communication is through their attorneys, or occasionally through Brennan when absolutely necessary. But her presence in town remains a liminal consciousness, like a scar that has healed but still aches in the cold weather. While at Carson's hardware store buying some small fixer-uppers for his apartment, Calder overhears 2 women talking in the next aisle. Have you heard? Mara Matthews is finally leaving town. It's long overdue. That woman had the nerve to show up at a community fundraiser last month. I've heard that no employer wants to hire her. In the wake of the Jules Harmon scandal, can you blame them? Who wants someone with such poor judgment representing their company? They walked away, their voices fading, but their words stayed. Calder feels no satisfaction in Mara's continued social exclusion, only a detached recognition of the natural consequences of her actions. Later that week, while buying coffee at his usual downtown cafe, he saw Mara through the window of a small boutique across the street. She was alone, looking absent-mindedly at a display. Even from a distance, he could see the changes in her, the weight loss, the simpler hairstyle, and the designer clothes she once favored were gone. She looked up suddenly, as if sensing his gaze, but Calder had already turned away and continued toward the office. There were no more words between them. That night, as he was working late in his office, his assistant, Ryan, knocked on the door. Mr. Matthews, there's someone here to see you. Calder looked at his watch. It was almost 8 o'clock. Who? Diane Porter. The name was unexpected. Diane is the other woman Jules cheated on, Councilman Porter's ex-wife. Calder met Jules briefly during his investigation of her scam, but had no personal contact with her. Let her in, he said curiously. Diane walked in hesitantly, looking elegant in a simple black dress with an uncertain expression. I'm sorry to bother you so late, Mr. Matthews. If it's not convenient now, I can come back tomorrow. That's okay. Calder pointed to a chair. What can I do for you? She sat down and smoothed her skirt nervously. This is a little awkward, but I wanted to talk to you about Mara. Calder's expression stays neutral. About her what? I realize you have no reason to be concerned about her welfare, Diane began. After everything you've been through, I don't blame you for ignoring the whole situation. But I'm worried about her. In what way? She's not doing well. Diane wrings her hands. The money for the divorce is running out. Attorney fees, rent, basic living expenses. She can't get a job here and is too proud to ask her family for help. I'm sorry to hear that, Calder says, and despite everything, he's not happy about Mara's pain, but he does mean it. But I'm not sure what that has to do with me. Nothing really matters. Diane smiled sadly. I just thought you should know. Other women who were involved with Jules. We formed a group like a support group. Everyone is moving on except Mara. She seems to be trapped. Trapped how? She can't let go of the past. Can't let go of the life she once had. She talks about you incessantly, sometimes blaming you for everything, sometimes expressing regret for what she has done. Calder digests this, his expression unchanged. Again, I sympathize, but I don't see how I can help. I'm not asking you to help her, Diane clarified. I just think, well, closure might be good for both of you. We're done, Calder says firmly. In court, with a signed divorce decree. Legally closed, yes. But emotionally, she paused, then shook her head. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have come. It's no longer your problem. As she got up to leave, Calder asked, why are you concerned about Mara's welfare? After what Jules did to all of you, I thought you would be the last person to care about her. Diane stopped and pondered the question. We're all victims of the same man, Mr. Matthews. The circumstances may be different, but the betrayal is the same. There's a strange connection in that shared experience. After she leaves, Calder is still sitting at his desk, thinking. Diane's visit stirs up memories he'd rather keep buried. Not the good times with Mara, but the moment when everything changed, the casual cruelty of her confession, the smug satisfaction in her eyes, when she said, I need a real man. He doesn't have any desire to see Mara again, nor does he need the emotional closure that Diane suggests. Whatever lingering connection they had had was severed the moment Mara chose Jules over their marriage. The next morning, as Calder was walking to a breakfast meeting at a downtown cafe, he saw Mara coming out of the post office. She saw him, too, and paused for a momentary pause in her step, then straightened her shoulders and continued on, her eyes looking straight ahead. They brushed past without saying hello, like strangers sharing a sidewalk. Later that week, Brennan called on his lunch break. Over the past few months, their conversations had become more regular, and while still not easy, they were no longer as tense. Dad, I want you to know that I'm helping Mom move to Portland next weekend. She got a job at a small real estate company there. That's good news, Calder replies. Honestly, a fresh start might be just what she needs. Well, I feel the same way. Brennan hesitated. She asked if you'd like to meet with her before she goes. To finish up, the corners of Calder's mouth tightened. There's no need. That's what I told her. But she insisted I ask. There was a pause. She seems a little different lately. It's more, I don't know, more accepting of what's going on. She stopped blaming you for everything. I'm happy to hear that, Calder said, and realized he meant it. This is an important step for her to move forward. But that doesn't mean we need to meet. I understand. Brennan's disappointment was obvious, but not forced. I'll tell her. After hanging up, Calder turns back to his work, but finds his concentration broken. The idea that Mara was leaving Millbridge didn't stir any emotions in him, not relief, not satisfaction, and certainly not regret. It's just a fact, like a weather report or a business deal. That night, he had dinner with Annalise Hamilton at a new restaurant just outside of town. In the months since his divorce, their friendship has deepened, though it remains strictly platonic, ignoring the rumors Mara has apparently been spreading. Annalise, a successful interior designer who regularly works with Matthews Architecture on high-end projects, was one of the few people who offered unconditional support throughout the divorce process. She never pressed for details, never judged, just was there for him when he needed a friend. You seem distracted, she observed as she waited for her entree. Jensen, what's wrong with the program? No, that one went as planned. Calder shifted his glass thoughtfully. I heard today that Mara is moving to Portland. Oh. Annalise nodded understandingly. How do you feel about that? Nothing feels right, he admits. Here's where the weirdness comes in. I thought I would kind of feel it. Relief, closure, whatever. But nothing. Maybe that's closure in itself, she suggested. When someone no longer has the ability to influence your emotions, either positively or negatively. Maybe. He put down his cup. She wanted to see me before she left. Apparently, it's about closure. You refused. Yes. There's nothing more to say. Annalise looked at him for a moment. You know, sometimes closure is not in what is said, but in seeing with clear eyes what is and what is no longer. Meaning, maybe seeing Mara one last time will confirm what you already know, that the person you married no longer exists for you. That connection was really cut off. Calder pondered Annalise's words. Is there any part of him that doubts? Need to confirm that this severance is complete? He doesn't think so, but the mere fact that he was still thinking about it implied otherwise. 2 days later, against his better judgment, Calder called Brennan. Tell your mother I'll have a cup of coffee with her tomorrow at Morgan's downtown at 2 o'clock. 15 minutes, no more. Really? Brennan sounds surprised. I'll tell her. Thanks, Dad. Don't thank me yet. I don't promise anything except to show up. Morgan's cafe is quiet at 2 p.m. The lunch crowd had dispersed, and the afternoon regulars had yet to arrive. Calder chose a table by the window, ordered a black coffee, and waited. A part of him still questioned the wisdom of the meeting. Mara arrived on time, wearing a simple blue dress he'd never seen before. She looked thinner and older, the confident glow that had once been her trademark dimming to a softer presence. Thank you for agreeing to meet, she said as she took the seat across from him. I wasn't sure you'd come. I'm not sure, Calder replied honestly. The waiter comes over and Mara orders tea. When they were alone again, she spoke carefully, as if every word had been rehearsed. I wanted to see you before I left town, to apologize to you in person for everything. Calder remained silent, neither accepting nor rejecting her apology. What I did was unforgivable, she continued. The affair, the lies, using Brennan against you. I spent a lot of time thinking about why I did that, and I realize now that I was very unhappy, not because of what you did or didn't do, but because of my own problems. Her fingers twirled nervously around the cup. I blame you because that's easier than taking responsibility. I told myself you were distant and unapproachable, and you were the one who pushed me towards Jules. But the truth is, I was selfish, seeking validation outside of my marriage instead of addressing internal issues. The waiter brings Mara's tea, temporarily interrupting the conversation. After she left, Calder finally spoke. Why are you telling me this now? Because I needed to say it. Because before I leave and try to start over, I need to take responsibility. Mara's eyes went straight to him. And because you deserve to hear this, even if it doesn't change anything between us. Calder nodded slightly, acknowledging the sentiment, but not forgiving the actions. I appreciate the apology. I hope Portland is a new beginning for you. It has to be, she said with a sad little smile. There is nothing left for me here but memories and regrets. They sat in silence for a moment, the space between them filled with echoes of a shared past that could not be undone. Are you happy, Calder? Mara asked suddenly. Your life now? The question caught him off guard, but he answered truthfully. I have inner peace. That's enough. What about Analyze? Both of you. Friend, he said firmly. That's all. Mara nodded, accepting this. I spread those rumors about you two having an affair. I was angry and wanted to hurt you. And for that I am sorry. It doesn't matter now. She looked at her watch and realized that the 15 minutes they had agreed upon was almost up. I should go? Thank you for being willing to see me. As she got up to leave, Calder found himself asking, why did you tell Brennan about the affair before you questioned me? The real reason. Mara hesitates for a moment, then replies with surprising candor. I know he'll be on my side. I know that will hurt you more than the affair itself. Your son is against you. I want to hurt you, Calder. I want you to feel that insignificance I sometimes feel. The blunt admission hung between them. Thank you for your candor, Calder concluded. Goodbye, Mara. I wish you all the best in Portland. Goodbye, Calder. As she walks away, Calder feels no sense of relief or regret. There was only a sense of calm certainty that this chapter of his life was truly over. Not in a dramatic way, but in a simple recognition of what is and what can never be again. The annual Millbridge Business Association Gala was held in the grand ballroom of the Westin Hotel and brought together some of the town's most prominent citizens. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed attendees, whose conversations created a soft hum that ebbed and flowed like waves. Calder straightened his tie and stepped into the entrance, accompanied by Analyze, wearing a simple but striking emerald green dress. 6 months have passed since Mara left Portland. 6 months of steadily rebuilding his career, his relationship with Brennan, and his own life. Nervous? Analyze asked with a knowing smile. No, Calder answered truthfully. Just another business engagement. But they both knew it was more than just socializing. It's his first major social appearance since his divorce. The first time he'll face the collective gaze of Millbridge society not as one half of Matthew's power couple, but as himself. Well, not entirely alone. Analyze's presence at his side was a comfort, though their relationship remained firmly platonic, ignoring the persistent rumors. She understands him in a way that few can: his drive, his introverted nature, his unwillingness to compromise on principle. They made their way through the crowd and took drinks from a passing waiter. Calder nods to acquaintances, shakes hands with business associates, and engages in the expected pleasantries. If people looked at him with curiosity, speculating about his divorce or his friendship with Analyze, he showed no sign of noticing or caring. Calder, Michael Donovan steps forward and extends his hand. It's good to see you here. And Miss Hamilton, you are as radiant as ever. Thank you, Michael. Analyze replied with a smile and enthusiasm. Angela, what's up? Good enough. She's over at the dessert table, probably figuring out how to sneak an extra slice of cheesecake without me noticing. He turned to Calder. The Westridge program looks fantastic. You must be pleased with the results. Very pleased, Calder agrees. Your brother's law firm seems pleased with their new offices in the East Wing. Very satisfied. He said the view alone was worth that premium. As they discussed the final details of the project, Calder's gaze crossed Michael's shoulder and habitually scanned the room. Then he saw them Brennan and, unexpectedly, Mara sitting at a table near the back of the ballroom. His son had mentioned coming to the party as part of his internship at a local engineering firm, but hadn't said his mother would accompany him. As far as Calder knew, Mara shouldn't have been in Millbridge at all. Calder, Analyze touched his arm gently, pulling him back into the conversation. Michael is asking Jensen to develop the project. Sorry, he said, refocusing on his lawyer. The groundbreaking ceremony is next month. We're just waiting for the final license. The conversation continued, but part of Calder's attention remained focused on the fact that Mara had appeared here. She looks different. Her hair is shorter and she dresses in a more understated style than the flamboyant style she once favored. She's talking to an elderly couple Calder doesn't recognize, her gestures animated but restrained. Brennan caught his gaze from across the room and gave a tentative wave. Their relationship has improved over the past few months. Not back to what it once was, and probably never will be, but healing is taking place through regular phone calls and occasional dinners. Calder apologized to Michael and Analyze and walked across the room toward his son. As he approached, Brennan stood up, his expression a mixture of nervousness and hope. Dad, hi. I didn't know if you'd come tonight. Nice to meet you, Calder says, and means it. I didn't know your mother was coming. Brennan shifted uncomfortably. She's back in town, just this weekend. Robert's birthday. He was referring to Mara's brother, who still lives in Millbridge. She wanted to come and support me tonight. I hope that's okay. It's okay, Calder assured him. This is a public event. Mara returned to the table at that point, stopping dead in her tracks when she saw Calder. Hello, Calder, she said, her voice carefully neutral. Mara, he nodded politely. I heard you came back for Robert's birthday. Yes, it's this weekend. She glanced at Brennan, then back to Calder. Brennan mentioned the party, and I thought it would be nice to come and see him in a professional setting. There was an awkward pause as the three of them stood in a strange triangle of shared history and respective futures. How's Portland? Calder finally asked, making a minimal effort to be polite. Pretty good. Not the same. The real estate market is more competitive, but I'm standing my ground. She tried to squeeze out a smile that didn't really reach her eyes. How's business? Very strong. The Westridge project is complete, and we're laying the cornerstone for the Jensen development next month. I saw the Westridge building yesterday. It's spectacular, Calder. Thanks. Another silence, longer, more tense. Brennan looked between the parents, obviously looking for some way to ease the tension. Dad, maybe you could come over and sit with us for a while, he suggested. Mom was just telling the Hendersons about her new apartment in Portland. It was a well-intentioned offer, but Calder shook his head. I should get back over to Analyze. We were just talking to Michael. At the mention of Analyze, a glimmer of something flickered in Mara's eyes, not exactly jealousy, but perhaps a realization of what she'd lost, of the life that was still going on without her. Of course, she said, keeping her composure. Nice to meet you, Calder. You too. He turns to Brennan. Call me tomorrow. We can have lunch before you go back to school. That's great. His son agreed, relief evident in his expression. As Calder walked away, he felt Mara's eyes follow him, searching for some sign of affection, some lingering connection. But there's nothing there. There was no anger, No resentment, not even indifference. There is only the calm acknowledgement that a chapter has ended. He returns to Analyze, who is chatting with the mayor and his wife. Is everything okay? She asked softly as the mayor walked away to greet the other guests. Yes, Calder says and realizes it's true. Seeing Mara didn't stir up strong emotions, didn't reopen old wounds. She's just someone he used to know, an image from a past that no longer defines him. The evening continued with a blend of networking and socializing that once would have exhausted Calder, but now is strangely comfortable. He found himself engaged in genuine conversations, amused by Analyze's witty observations, and discussing future projects with potential clients. At one point, he caught a glimpse of Mara watching him from across the room. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment of connection Calder felt only a detached acknowledgement. No victory, no pain. It's just a matter of recognizing that he's moved on, that the control she once had over him is gone. Later in the evening, as the party drew to a close and the guests began to leave, Brennan approached him again, this time alone. Mom's leaving, he explains. Uncle Robert's coming to get her. I just want to make sure we have lunch tomorrow. Noon, Carson's, Calder suggested, talking about a restaurant they both liked. Perfect. Brennan hesitated, then added, Thanks, Dad, for being so gracious tonight. I know it must not be easy to see Mom unexpectedly. It's okay, Calder assured him. Oddly enough, it really doesn't matter. The expected embarrassment, the resurfacing of old wounds, it didn't happen. Instead, he felt nothing but a calm certainty that he had made the right choice and that the life he was now living was of his own making. When Brennan leaves to join his mother, Analyze appears at Calder's side. Ready to go? I think we've fulfilled our social obligations for the night. Overrun, Calder agreed with a hint of a smile. Let's go. Outside. The night air seemed cool and fresh after the warmth of the ballroom. The valet brought Calder's car around, and while they waited, Analyze looked at him thoughtfully. You look different tonight, she observed. More relaxed, somehow. Calder mused. I feel different. Meeting Mara and talking to her confirmed some things I thought I already knew. What's that? I really moved on. What happened no longer defines me. Analyze nodded understandingly. That was a win, Calder. Not over Mara, but over the past itself. A silent victory, he agreed, opening the car door for her. Yes. As they drove away from the hotel, Calder felt a sense of peace overtake him. Not exactly happiness. The word seemed too simple for the complex mix of acceptance and determination he felt. But maybe it's satisfaction, knowing that he experienced betrayal without letting it break him or make him bitter. He hasn't forgiven Mara or Brennan for their roles in what happened, and probably never will. But he had freed himself from the bonds of that betrayal and rebuilt his life on his own terms. In this reconstruction, in this refusal to be defined by the behavior of others, he discovers a power he didn't know he had before. It wasn't the kind of dramatic victory he might once have imagined. Mara humiliated and himself vindicated in some public forum. It's quieter than that, more personal, more lasting. It's just freedom. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.